as we came across the Main, 30, 40 miles out from the coast, we started seeing buoys and lobster pot mania. Maine is just a shocker for that, and indeed we'd actually worried about this because all the reports we'd had, and people had caught buoys around their props and their rudders and things, and we'd had a case in Chile where we'd had a problem with our rudder, and so we actually ran a line from basically the back edge of the keel at the bottom up to the bottom of the rudder to try and, so any lines that came down would at least slide out under the rudder and not pop up. It was sort of about the best thing we could think to do. And we realised why when we got there. Just the number of buoys. Karin said it was like hundreds and thousands on the top of a cake. And that's probably the best description we can give. Some of the lobster pots, and we're talking about 8 metres apart. These things, just a sea of them, 6, 8 metres apart. So you're going like this the whole time. You couldn't use the autopilot. And just trying to wind through them. Now, because some of them are in water as deep as 100 metres, they come up and they put 3 buoys on the top. The first one's underwater, the next one's nearly underwater, and only the top one you can see. So you've got to be very wary going up tide of any lobster pot. And the only thing that's good is that they have now banned floating lines. And the government came along and said, if you produce 100 metres of floating line, we'll give you 100 metres of line that sinks. And they actually supplied it. And so the lines actually don't float on the surface now, which is a great relief. But it really did, it's so vast that it spoiled Maine for us to some degree. We found out that they've just issued 50 extra licences for putting buoys out this year, but each licence entitles 700 buoys. There are hundreds of thousands of these things all over the place. It is. And they say the lobsters don't mind. Yes. Well, they do catch them there, and there are plenty of them, and they're moderately cheap to eat. Coastline of Maine, very pretty, very nice. You can walk around all sorts of places, and very enjoyable. We also visited the wooden boat shop, because the wooden boat shop's in Maine, and we wanted really to go there, because we got a wooden boat. And so we enjoyed Lunenburg. We thought the wooden boat shop would be like that, but apart from about 20 adult students who are learning to use power planes and skill saws and various other things, and a few dinghies, wooden dinghies around, there wasn't much else. There was a shop that we bought a couple of t-shirts in, and that was it. So Brooklyn, Maine didn't actually, is hardly worth the effort of going there, unfortunately. Okay, where are we now? Oh, yes. New Hampshire has a very small amount of coastline and a navy town there where they build submarines. They're not building many submarines at the moment. The things were quiet, but they built this thing and they were out there testing it. It was a funny looking thing. It was going like the clappers and had another boat there alongside of it. But we presumed it was navy, and it sort of looks a bit like it. You wouldn't show up very well on radar. Is it? Oh, okay. I guess they're going to do something with it. But it just looked a bit sinister. Yeah. Marblehead, lovely town. Oh, it's very busy once you get down to Massachusetts. Lots more boats. Marinas get more expensive. Marblehead, one of the nicest towns you could visit, and they even had a place to tie up for a dock for a few hours. So we enjoyed that. But some of the places down in Massachusetts the moorings are so close together, they actually have fenders all around the boats because they bump into each other on the moorings. It's that tight, yeah. Mayflower, Plymouth. Was it 1620 the Pilgrims came across there and set foot on the Plymouth Rock, and when they arrived, and the Plymouth Rock now sits under a big impressive gazebo, and it's all covered with glass and things. You look down at this rock and you sort of look at it from a couple of angles and scratch your head and say, well, it just looks like all the other rocks on the beach as far as I could see. In any case, we asked the taxi driver, who was a bit of a tour guide, how they knew that was the Plymouth Rock. He said, well, some years ago they decided that they had to have a Plymouth Rock there, and so they asked the oldest man in the town, who came down to the beach and said, it was that one. And that's the Plymouth Rock. Right. Further down towards Newport, that's the Vanderbilt's beach house. Yeah. And but actually, I've actually jumped ahead a little bit, because we actually stopped in Boston as well. Stopped at the Hingham Yacht Club, a nice place, and we watched on the television there. We were the only ones watching at first, as New Zealand was doing rather well. And as the tide turned and somehow or other Oracle turned their things underwater into wings, understand, with some help from Boeing engineers who they'd spoken with, they suddenly grew wings instead of hydrofoils, and it was amazing how interested the local yacht club became when that started to happen. There were one or two that wanted the Kiwis to win, but not very many. However, on through Cape Cod Canal and down to Martha's Vineyard with some nice anchorages, but too many tourists. And this is Newport, down in Narragansett Bay, where we returned all the charts to our where we'd been loaned them, and went down and had a look at the Newport shipyard, and you can see I'm the thin one standing there, by the way, and that's their new travel lift, 500 tons. It's a big one, and they had cranes around. They were just assembling it when we were there. They had cranes around, but you think the Spirit of New Zealand is 250 tons, and this is a 500-ton travel lift. They're getting rather big, pretty impressive. What is it? 16 tires, and just mega engineering, which is interesting. And on down the coast to Mystic Seaport, lovely spot, Mystic. And we stayed there a few days, tied up in the museum. And that's the Joseph Conrad in the background. Some lovely boats. Joseph Conrad's going back a bit. They're strapped for cash to some degree, and they're doing up the Charles W. Morgan, which is a genuine whaling ship. It's only one still in existence. But if you ever go to USA and you're on the East Coast up New England way, that's Mystic, Connecticut, spend a whole day at Mystic Seaport. You will never, ever regret it. And New York Harbour itself, South Street Seaport, Peking, wonderful ship that Irving Johnson went on, and is that sort of that ageless video that I think everybody must surely have seen. Unfortunately, Mystic South Street Seaport is only open a couple of days a week now, and she's looking pretty shabby. We went on board the previous time we went to New York, but they have a lot of money to keep battleships and subs and things going as museums, but not so much the sailing ships. This is our anchorage in New York. New York marinas are very, very expensive. You know, they blow your budget. But there is a little anchorage over there, the Statue of Liberty, that we anchored in. We had to walk across a park for about half an hour to get to the ferry to go into New York, but this was where we, just in from here was where we anchored, and of course that's the new World Trade Center building there. And by the time we got back, when we were there first of all in June, the Statue of Liberty was closed and there were cranes all around the base. Again, Hurricane Sandy had wrecked all the stonework and everything all around the base, and they had to rebuild the whole thing, but they actually managed to get it open on the 4th of July, about 6-7 months after it was wrecked. And so they've done a heck of a lot of work. They've done an awful lot of work from the 6 months we were away from New York. But But paying $4 a foot in a marina per night is just hurts a little bit. Down into the Chesapeake, and down the coast and up the Delaware River and down through the canal and into the Chesapeake. This is in the northern part of the Chesapeake. Wonderful rivers there. It's a huge area with rivers that go in for 20, 30, 40, 50 miles. Shallow in places, but with 6 foot 6 draft, you get around very well. It'd be better with 5 foot draft, but just some lovely places. And of course, this was an evening scene. And of course, having been taught by Bob all these years the importance of looking at clouds and looking at the weather and so on, I always remember what Bob taught me. Red wine at night, sailor's delight. Went up one of the rivers to a place called Chestertown, where we were told they were having a downrigging ceremony for a little vessel in here. Traditional vessels. This one was the Calma-Nickel, which was built in Delaware and has crossed the Atlantic. She arrived just after the Mayflower and brought not Pilgrim Fathers but other settlers to Delaware. And over here we've got the New Pride of Baltimore with the very heavily raked masts, the schooner Virginia, and a number of other vessels there. Really very nice scene. Now the Chesapeake is a long bay, very wide but a long bay. And when the wind blows from the north and blows the water out, the tide doesn't come in very far, and so everybody goes aground. When it actually blows from the south, and it had 3 or 4 days before we were here, it actually pushes the tide in, and up comes the tide, and what happens? Well, it comes up over the top of the marinas, and this was a booth in the middle of a car park, and this chap here is about to get his feet wet when he's walking back ashore. So again, our tidal calculations aren't all that wonderful. Yeah, there needs to. But we met many kind folk in the States, wonderful people, and some people we met there. We're just sitting down having coffee with them. They said, "Oh, we've got a dock and a house over the other side of the Chesapeake Bay, and come and tie up in our dock, and we'll be going to work, but you can have the car, and there's the house, and if you like to walk the dog, that'll be fine." And so we spent a couple of days tied up in this dock here. It was it was really starting to become autumn, and so that wasn't that long ago. And the autumn colours. This is in the Severn River, down in which is, you go in from the Severn River, goes past Annapolis, and we ended up at a place called Clements Creek, where we were invited on a Cruising Club of America weekend sail with about 5 or 6 other boats across to the other side of the Chesapeake, and again meeting more people and being entertained, and finally we ended up down in Fishing Bay, Deltaville. The boatyard is over here. We're anchored there, and we'd been anchored a day, and another boat came in, and the 2 boats anchored in the bay were flying the Kiwi flag. Both were wooden. This is Balvenie, a Townsend design with some folks that we got to know quite well too. And we got her out of the water. Our line, we had actually picked up a buoy. We thought we had at one stage. We'd picked up a buoy in Maine, and here's our broken line. It had broken away from it carried away from the bottom of the rudder. It was broken through, and so it probably had done its work. And there we parked Victoria until next March when we return. Now, over in the Chesapeake, Bob, we at the Chesterton, when we were looking at the downrigging thing, we went to a number of events, including a gentleman who gave a lecture on great storms of the Chesapeake, and he told us all about the storms of the Chesapeake over the years, and he had written a book which we duly purchased for the library, so I will donate that to the library. Where do I go from here? Bay of Islands, I think, for a holiday. But no, Victoria is stuck there in a nice little boatyard quite safely, and so I guess we actually stopped off in Denver with some friends. The friends who came cruising with us, we stopped at their place up in Denver on the way back and went up into the Rockies and barbecued steak in the snow and things. And now they've had a real bullet. Got an email from them today that said it was 20 degrees below 0 Fahrenheit at the moment. So I told them about the weather we're having. We've got other friends in Seattle, so we'll probably go and visit them on the way back in March. Probably go to Hanoi as well to visit our grandchildren, and then it'll be back probably early April to the Chesapeake. April's quite early, there still could be a bit of snow around, but we want to do some more cruising there. We want to go up the Potomac River, and you can anchor about 1 kilometre from the Lincoln Memorial, row ashore, and go walk about and go up to all the museums and things all around Washington, D.C., and a number of other places on the Chesapeake. That'll take us through to May, when current thinking is the most likely thing is we'll head for the Azores and then across towards Scotland, perhaps Norway next year. Going to have to find somewhere to store the boat to come home again, and well, maybe we'll be here this time next year telling you about something different.
What, the best Scotch that you
Oh, the Scotch. Well, Tony and I have a date in somewhere in Scotland. Tom? Well, as a doctor, maybe you could prescribe something a bit better than single malt. Yeah, look, it's not all fun in the sun. It is reasonably hard. In fact, actually, some people get paid to go to sea and drive boats. However, you can sit there and watch the world go by and put your feet up and watch television, or you can go out and try and do something and have a bit of enjoyment and learn a few things. And I think that it's very easy to retire and rot away. So you've got to do something with your old age. Look, you've got to have some goals. You've got to have some things you want to do. And okay, I can't say that we love being at sea in a yacht. It's okay. Some days it's very nice, but a lot of the time you're a tourist. You're going along. You're travelling. You're trying to see what's going on in other parts of the world. It's just but an awful lot of it's boring too. You know, you do get past the adrenaline bits. They come and they go. But what other goals? There are other goals that we'll be looking at when we come back here. Karin tells me that we're only going to be away for 5 years, and so that's probably about right. But then again, if we get fed up with it, we'll turn around and sail home. But it's a matter of having something you want to do and looking at it. And this last year we wanted to go up to the Great Lakes. We didn't quite make it, but we made it to Lake Champlain. And in actual fact, I think it was actually a better option, as it turned out, more enjoyable. But that was by chance. Next year we do want to go to Norway. We've got a number of relatives and friends there. We'd love to go there. We've been there by plane and things. We'd like to go and sail there. And we want to go to Scotland again. Been there once. Obviously the Mediterranean has some attraction. We've got a number of friends in England. So Europe has some attractions, but it's more or less having these things that you want to go and do, and taking your house with you. Well, okay, we'll do it for as long as we want to do it, then we'll turn around and come home. Well, that's plan C, as it were. We always knew that if you couldn't get through, you have to do that. Although we did run into a boat that drew about 8 feet, and they were actually trying to ballast the boat over to try and reduce the draft. But putting weight on top, even though it leant it over, I figured that they weren't actually going to do it. But there are all sorts of things you can do like that. We went across France back in the mid-90s, and that was more challenging. We had no paint on the bottom then, and we were really crunching our way across there with too much draft. And there were times when we thought we might not get out, and we might not get back either. But yeah, you just keep plugging away at it, and you just keep trying, keep going, and there's a lot of challenges. And let's be honest, when you sort of get a bit of grey hair, things aren't as easy as they used to be. You don't have the energy, and you don't repair as well, and there's all sorts of medical things that can happen, and so but why give up? You just might as well keep plugging on. As an old aunt of Karin's once said, "You're a long time dead." No, we had that in mind, Kevin. We came into the St. Lawrence just down from Montreal, and 4 or 5 knots of current against you doesn't mean that way, back that way. And they were back a long way, because they're well up towards Lake Ontario from Montreal. If we'd come into Lake Ontario, but as it was, we got, instead of the Erie Canal, Lake Ontario and the Thousand Islands and Montreal, well, Quebec's nicer than Montreal anyway. Instead of that, we got the Lake Champlain and the Richelieu River, which was lovely. Yes, Penny Whiting, for instance, has been through there, and yeah, very nice. But I think Lake Champlain was probably just as nice, if not better. So, it was 4 knots down from where we entered the St. Lawrence, but it was really from Quebec City on down that the tides really started to honk. And it was much more difficult down there because the marinas were 50, 60 miles apart, and so you had to get your timing right. And I hope you didn't get too many headwinds. We expected westerlies and to be sailing down there. We got mainly easterlies and up to 30 knots, which was, that was your fault, wasn't it? Oh, the wrong. Yeah. Yeah. Varies, but I was sort of thinking how much, probably 2/3 the price it is here in America. Canada is a bit more expensive. In the States, we've been back a week, but the States is a bit cheaper to live than here. What were we paying for a gallon, wasn't it? Was it? I can't even remember. But we're talking about $1. What are you talking? $1.50 a litre here for diesel, and I guess that we were paying a little over $1 a litre for diesel over there. Yeah. So yeah, it was a bit cheaper than here. Yeah. But it was cheaper than here, and in the supermarkets and everything else, food was generally cheaper over there, just a bit, because don't forget we've got a high exchange rate at the moment, and up around 82, 83 cents is pretty good. If it dropped to 70, it'd be on a par, I think, or 65, it'd be on a par. Yeah. Yeah. Well, we've got 65 horsepower in a 20-ton boat, so we're definitely not overpowered. And there were other boats that were doing it. Not too much of a problem. You're not going to motor up against 7 knots anyway. You might hold your own against it, but you just got to work within the. Well, that's right. And then you come to the bit that there is no other tide, and you've still got 4 knots against you. So, yeah, I wouldn't want to go up the St. Lawrence. 3 knots in a river against you, you're really going quite slowly. No, there were certainly down around New York there was a fair bit, but New York Harbour wasn't any busier than the harbour is here. Around Long Island Sound there was quite a few boats. We were pretty late in the season by then, and yes, there are very busy times, particularly at weekends, but we didn't feel it was overcrowded. It was pretty good that way. Nova Scotia was lovely. Hardly any other boats. Very nice indeed. In fact, actually, one of the options that we have is going back up there next year and going up to Newfoundland. And it's one of the things that sort of we probably won't do, but we actually discussed it quite seriously for some of the trip that we were there. Yeah. Well, there's a huge range of budgets. I think the lowest budget that I've come across is a couple of £1,000 a year on a little boat without a motor and sunbrella sails, and that's but that's really doing it hard, and that means that you're walking 3 miles to the supermarket for 3 trips to load up rather than spending $2 on a taxi. But I guess that I wouldn't like to do it for under 50,000 a year. That'd be, you'd be getting, yeah, that'd be New Zealand dollars. I wouldn't like to try and do it for that. I think we're spending a bit more than that. But you're not going to get by for much under that and have a really comfortable life. Yeah, you can go and hire a car and go to a show in New York and do all the normal things that you want to do, because it's all very well being terribly austere and not doing anything, but you're just sitting on the boat looking at the coastline. So it's sort of somewhere in that vicinity is what you probably need to plan on. Oh yes, yeah. And get you back to New Zealand, and you have a reasonable lifestyle. Our boat's a bit bigger because 50 feet, and so it costs us a bit in marinas. So it costs a little bit more for fuel, but then again we can buy more fuel when it's cheap. And you also can carry a lot of stuff and a lot of food and that sort of thing. So you can go to Costco. Costco's a wonderful institution. And you buy all this stuff and stick it in, and 8 years later you're still finding some of it. I wanted to do a little project and I needed some plywood, which I didn't have, and so we wandered around the boatyards at Lunenburg and got talking to people and even into the workshops and things. Yeah, they're pretty good. I would have. It was a weekend when we were at Southwest Bay in Maine, which is the Hinckley yard. Hinckley's a lovely boat, and that looked a little bit sort of big and official, so we didn't try for there. You go and knock on. People are really accommodating there. They're really kind, and you go and start chatting to them, and it's pretty easy. And certainly at that boatyard where they had all those varnished boats, signs on the door, do not enter, etc. So you go and start talking to the owner, come on in and have a look. And so it was like that. As soon as they could see that you were interested and not just a gawky tourist, then you were sort of invited in, and didn't run into much red tape that way. No, it was pretty good. The best thing is to go out and start talking to people, and they are very, very welcoming in the States and Canada. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Bob.